feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Sundance review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, no love, no vuv.
Yeah, today we are reviewing Corey Finley's Landscape with Invisible Hands, starring Tiffany Haddish, Asante Black, Kylie Rogers, Josh Hamilton, Michael Gandolfini, William Jackson Harper, and the Viv. You guys might know Corey Finley. He directed a film titled Thoroughbreds with Anya Taylor-Joy and
Olivia Cook. And the late Anton Yelchin.
Yes, from a few years ago. The film premiered at Sundance. Does it have a distributor yet? UA. Oh, it's MGM,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's
UA?
MGM. Yeah. And Plan B is the production company.
And Annapurna as well, co-production. Yeah. So that means maybe it pops up on Amazon. I don't know how that works now that Amazon owns MGM. So
well, I think some MGM releases do get theatrical releases, like
through other distributors, right?
Yeah, because you look at something like Women Talking, right?
Yeah,
which is also the same studio,
right? And
Universal
I never know
Pictures
because
Canada released it in Canada.
I never know like when the deals were before the Amazon acquisition and stuff like that, because you'd think this would just be branded a Prime Video movie if it was going to Amazon, which it was not. So I'm not quite sure. It's probably going to get a theatrical release. But Eric, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. We're still kind of rolling with the punches here when it comes to Sundance. So we'll be releasing content for the next couple of days. I hate using that word sometimes, content, but reviews, hashtag content. So this is going to be a little bit of a bombardment of last minute Sundance reviews on Untitled Movie Reviews, but we apologize for not getting there sooner. Just been dealing with some family stuff and also just
it's
life
hard
in general.
When you're trying to watch this many movies. We both netted out around 15-ish films. That's a lot in a small amount of time, as well as trying to record and do everything. I'm almost found with sometimes with these screening at home things, it's like just get the movies out, watch as much as possible, and then get the reviews out after, because I still think they're pretty relevant and stuff like that. But yes, if you guys have no idea what Landscape with Invisible Hand is, here's the plot via Wikipedia. In a near future in which an alien species known as the VUV have taken over Earth, an aspiring teenage artist and his girlfriend hatch a scheme to make money by broadcasting their dating life to the fascinated aliens in the wake of VUV's labor-saving technology. But the two teens slowly come to hate each other and can't break up without bankrupting their families. A weird little movie.
Very strange.
Some good, some bad. I did like quite a bit of this, but Eric, I'll kick it back over to you. What did you think of Landscape with an Invisible Hand?
Conceptually contemplative, but emotionally disconnected. And honestly, you're watching the film and you're more fascinated by the world building in which humans and the VUV cohabitate and their sort of cooperation or disconnect throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
And the problem with this film, and I think why ultimately it's a mixed negative review coming from me at least, is that you're watching this thing and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm more impressed by the obvious kind of metaphors to gentrification and capitalism and the idea of phasing out redundancy, and the redundancy being human workers in this case.
Yeah.
And it will remind you of things like District 9. There's a little bit of the Independence Day sequel,
District 9,
Joe Dante's Explorers, where we see how human beings adopt new technology, and it can be both a negative and positive within a modern setting. And so with that, you see how characters within this world are even more divided than they've ever been, to the point where the 1% live on floating sort of landscapes that kind of
ships almost.
It almost weirdly reminds you of the utopian society in Battle Angel Alita, where the people want to get to the top, but most of which are at the bottom. And then you have these power dynamics and shifting kind of concerns within the microcosm of this smaller community, that we watch sort of this one family in particular, living their life, but then also trying to be helpful to another that's in need, and how, again, like this weird upstairs downstairs dynamic kind of forms between these two kind of passive aggressive rivaling families. And when you're watching this thing
Mm-hmm.
again, there's a lot there to kind of contemplate and be fascinated by. But when you get to the actual core of the story, the emotions of it, the you know the preservation of these characters, you're not really at all interested in them as people.
Invested, yeah.
They're more, I don't even say caricature, but they're more
Or archetypes, but
examples
yeah.
than anything else to kind of give you the gist of what this world is. I think Corey Finley is a very good filmmaker, even though I didn't like this movie as much, or his last movie, which was an HBO film, Bad Education,
Oh
with
yeah,
Hugh
I did
Jackman.
like Bad Education more than you did, but
But
yeah.
there is something there where, like, his focus on sort of, again, the world feels fulfilled. It's just the actual core of the human emotions isn't really there.
Yeah, I'm 1,000% with you. I've always liked Corey Finley's vibes. Not completely. Like there was something like I love the vibe of Thoroughbreds. I like the vibe of Bad Education because I remember that movie, seeing it with you at TIFF as well. Um, Something off kilter or strange about all three of these movies, that like where the vibes are off, but there is a vibe to them. And whether that's a good or bad thing is ultimately subjective. But each one of those movies, I never quite knew how to feel throughout them. And I think I ultimately liked Thoroughbreds but didn't like it. I think I was surprised by Bad Education but never thought about it again. And then with this, there was something like stylistically that I always like in his films and his filmmaking. But I completely agree with you that the weirdness and kind of that world building and kind of the things he's talking about, whether it's labor and classes and stuff like that, even in a world where you're not abducted, overtaken by an alien race. You still have the bureaucratic nature of aliens could be suing you, or you owe them money, and there's still all these capitalist kind of themes and things like that, where I thought that was very interesting, where they were studying humanity. So when they came here, they adopted a lot of that and just kind of continued it, but in their own ways. So it's got this kind of weird vibe to it, especially with the paintings from the lead, Adam, and then how that kind of plays throughout the film. I'm kind of with you that you just never really get emotionally invested in either of the two families that you're seeing in that relationship, kind of in Adam's kind of journey of being an artist, or what he's trying to do throughout the film as well. Where I think I'm more interested in those weird style choices, or the design of the Veuve, or like I said, the meetings on the alien spacecraft, and like all this kind of stuff, where it's just got this kind of weird vibe to it, and the design of those creatures are funny and off-putting when you finally get to see them. And some of the tech stuff is it's very relatable, based on even stuff like, even like you said, automation and workers being put out of their jobs because they can just be done by AI or a robot, is something that we deal with right now. So to utilize like aliens coming in and doing that as well, I think is an interesting angle. Live streaming is a very prominent thing in our lives, Twitch and YouTube and everything, of just live streaming your life's vlogs and things like that. So to kind of see how this alien race is fascinated with humans, and that if you just stream your life to them, you can kind of make money. And that's how people, it is an interesting, social commentary, even on today, in today's modern society, right? Like there is something there of like that there are no real jobs, and you have to kind of live stream your life for entertainment to make money, right? Like I think that's kind of an interesting kind of angle, but the film never quite gets there, to your point of like caring about this relationship between these two young kids, caring about this kind of class, not warfare, but kind of class structure with this family who was homeless, who came and lives in their basement. Tiffany Haddish is always one of those people that, like, I like her, like, I really do, but whenever I see her pop up in a movie, it could go either way. Where I'm like, I don't know if her acting chops are quite there for some of the like emotional kind of stuff they try to get out of her sometimes. And then this family that moves in, there were some times where I'm like, I would kick these fucking people out of my house immediately. I'm sorry, but like the way that they're acting sometimes, I'm like, it doesn't feel believable, even in this world, that you would continuously let them be there. Like you have Michael Gandolfini playing the son of Josh Hamilton, right?
Yeah, and Josh Hamilton's probably best
And
known for a lot of people now, as the kind dad in eighth
in eighth
grade.
grade, yeah, that's what I remembered him from. He's been in lots of stuff, but that's kind of the thing that most people would recognize him from. And even Michael Gandolfini, it took me a second to realize it was him. And then they're just assholes sometimes and just entitled. And I just like, I'm sure they're trying to say something there, but it just
Well,
kind of,
there is. I think
I
there's
mean,
an
obviously
obvious
in that
thing.
last act as well, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
like what it's looking at, you have this new hierarchy, and the Vov, who we don't see for the first little while, are on the very top of the scale, and then humans are at
that
the
are also
bottom.
living. Yes,
Some of
and
them
there are
which are
some
living
that are
there.
living. Yeah,
But then that's even interesting because I think there's a moment where the two lead characters, the teenagers, they go to visit Shirley, one of the Vovs, and their driver used to be a surgeon, and the surgeon talks about how his job as a doctor didn't pay as much as being a limo driver for this
yeah,
Vov,
the
and
Vov.
that
Yeah,
like his time could be better used to help and save people, but because the salary is so much higher,
and
it's
that's
also a way the
interesting,
Vov
right?
can show their wealth, right? Like they're
Exactly,
taking
which
people in
you
prominent
can
positions and demoting them.
and you can apply that to modern day society, right? There's
Yeah,
many situations where you're, whether you want to apply that to being an athlete or a movie star, of like people who get paid much more when you could be contributing more to society doing
yeah.
something else. And I'm not saying sports and entertainment doesn't contribute to society, but like I do think that there's something interesting there. And that's why I'm on that mixed negative side with you too, because I kept going back and forth on it.
Yeah, and then going back to hierarchy, you have this dynamic of a black family living on the top floor and a white
Yeah.
family living in the basement. And obviously the Michael Gandolfini character is the one that's kind of representing the resentment and hate and the ignorance. And Josh Hamilton's character is too, but in a more kind of subtle way, where it's like he feels that he's done everything right and he should be entitled to having the success as being an accountant, because that was his job, before everything shifted and changed with the Vov coming and kind of changing the way that the world works. And so that is an interesting dynamic in itself, but again, it feels like you're watching a really interesting sort of thesis statement more than a fully integrated film that kind of balances both of those things out. And when you're watching it, you're thinking to yourself, again, it's really impressively done. It's beautifully shot. I think the one thing that is incredible about this movie is Michael Abel's score. The
Yeah,
same composer
it
who
is
has
very
worked with
good.
Jordan Peele most recently on Nope. And there is that kind of like B movie sci-fi kind of feel
Yeah,
to it, but then it
you're
kind of
right
does
there.
some
I
really
agree with that.
interesting things with there's more emotion in that score than there is in the film. And you mentioned that the photos that the lead character is painting, they
Yeah,
kind of work as chapter breaks in a
they
way
do.
to
Yeah,
kind of help you kind of know like what's going on and what's being represented. There is one really strong sequence that's also ends on a very strange note but works really well, that features William Jackson Harper in a small role that I think, again, it's almost like that one scene works better than the whole movie in terms of the
I
idea
agree.
of an estranged parent kind of coming back, and you think like maybe it's going to go in one direction but it doesn't. And yeah, you find yourself more impressed by the design of the movie, the scope and scale in which it's telling its story. The Vov, I do think, are interesting in themselves in that they're not the typical kind of alien that we've come to know
Yeah.
in horror movies or in science
That
fiction
invades
films,
Earth. Yeah.
where they're not probing people. They're the only probing they're doing is they're taking over in a capitalist manner, you know,
Yeah.
and that I think is way more interesting. But then also, like, they talk about the first time that they kind of found out about Earth and interacted with Earth, and that was in the 1950s, but they felt that Earthlings weren't developed until more recently. And I find that fascinating because there's a scene where Tiffany Haddish and one of the Vuvs are watching 50s television, and the way that the Vuv interprets how, you know, people should behave is the way that men in society, a certain age group of men in society, feel about how tradition should be, and, you know, acted
Even
upon.
that is interesting, right? Like people in power think or
Yeah.
men in power that like still act like it should be the 1950s, and how people should be, how men should act and how women should act. And I think all of that adds up for really interesting. And this is going to be a theme in a few of these movies that we've watched. We already did Fair Play, and you guys can check out our review for Cat Person as well, where I feel like
Michael Gandolfini's in that too.
all three of those movies, I feel like all have interesting nuggets, as well as this one. They just don't quite hit the mark, and there's something off about all three of them, in my opinion. I know you liked Fair Play a little bit more than I did, but
But I'm still on that
and
level of kind of like a
yeah,
mid-range kind of movie that maybe is a bit overblown now because it was picked up by
yeah,
Netflix for $20 million. But these
yeah.
movies are more, I think, interesting to talk about than they are
Then
to
they are,
watch.
yeah, I agree, and I feel like they're worth watching all three. Uh, to have those conversations, but I still don't like recommend them as like for entertainment or even like to get, some of the things that it wants to get out. I don't think it quite does in all three of those movies. But they're there for you to kind of take and go, it was almost there, and
It
they could have done
was.
something. It could have done something interesting in all of those films. And so ultimately I'm going to give the film a 2.5. I like its style. I like the Vuv. They're weird. The movie overall is kind of weird. I agree. I like the cinematography and the score and stuff like that. But then it's how it utilizes its themes and its story and stuff like that. It just doesn't quite come together. So I'm at a 2.5.
Yeah, it collapses, I think, by its sheer ambition in terms of building this world. And I think where a lot of it kind of falls flat is in that last act when they're trying to really cohesively put the family at the
Mhm.
forefront. And when you're watching that, you're like, I've never, I mean, nobody's bad in this movie either. We should say that, like,
No,
the performances are good, but it doesn't feel like they're people in that way. And you mentioned archetypes, but like it's just like even then you kind of feel like, oh, okay, like you want me to connect in that emotional way of, you know, what we should be valuing the most when it comes to the world we live in now, and even the world that, you know, we lived in before. And it just never kind of follows through in that way. Again, it's great to talk about. There are things in the movie that are really good, and I think like that score is incredible. But it is also a 2.5 for me because at the end, it just feels like the whole point of the movie never completely congeals in a way that it's like, oh, this is something that I completely got on both an emotional level but also on a cerebral one, and that's just really unfortunate. Even though there is a lot to appreciate.
I totally agree. Thank you all for listening or watching. We really, really do appreciate it. As you're listening to this, episode 3 of The Cast of Us is available for you guys to go check out. Probably one of the best episodes of television of all time. I think that's, I don't want to, I mean, you've watched it at this point, hopefully. Um, and you should go check out our episode. We did like a 2-hour after show on it, breaking down every moment. So go check out The Cast of Us podcast services on YouTube. Just a phenomenal hour and 20 minutes of television. It's fantastic. You can check out all of our other Sundance reviews. We have reviews for not Drift, sorry, Shortcomings, You Hurt My Feelings, Cat Person, Fairyland, Eileen, Theater Camp, Infinity Pool, Fair Play, Magazine Dreams, Sometimes I Think About Dying, Run Rabbit Run, and The Pod Generation. Those are the films we saw at Sundance that we will be reviewing. They'll be scattered out throughout the next week or so, so you should get 1 or 2 per day. It'll be one of those. Surprise each day. I won't spoil everything for you. Go check out our newest episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. We did a big kind of breakdown of all the Oscar nominees, so that was a blast. It's a beefy episode as well as the Critics' Choice winners. One-stop shop for everything. Just head over to Untitled_movies over on Letterboxd. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com, and you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Martin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on all the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Thank you for watching.
You'll get that when you see the movie. Okay, bye everyone.